hope I answered a lot of your questions about my breast augmentation. And now I'm going to talk about breastfeeding. So grab a cup of coffee or a cup of tea because I think this is going to be a long one. Meeting Avalia for the first time was the most overwhelming and joyous experiences of my life. Like, I just don't think I could possibly put into words how I felt in that moment and how magical. Like, it's funny, like as a midwife, I've seen it time and time again, that raw emotion in the room, and it just wasn't until I experienced it myself that I realized just how amazing it could be. And when I had her skin to skin against me for the first time and she looked up into my eyes, it just felt so natural to want to put her on and have our first feed. It was just so surreal, just this explosion of love. And I think you're just stuck in this newborn bubble of oxytocin, which is the hormone that you get when you've just given birth. It's like better than the best champagne you can ever imagine kind of high. And I was so stuck in that moment that I wasn't even looking at my feed and realizing that Avalia actually had a tongue tie when she was born. And it wasn't until the second feed that I realized that when she tried to feed, she couldn't take my full like areola into her mouth, and she was just nipple feeding. So we ended up having to have her frenulum, which is the skin that attaches your tongue to the bottom of your mouth, snipped so her tongue could come out of her mouth properly. Most of the time you don't even need to do anything and no action is required. The baby will still be able to feed, but I found that helped us a lot. Literally as soon as we had the procedure done, it was just like immediate relief, and Avalia was able to latch so much better. So I'm going to answer some of the questions that were sent through my social media channels. And the first question is, what is your advice for new mothers? I think like the most important thing is trust your instincts. Like, we all know, I think deep down in our stomachs, like what's not right. And if you feel like something's not right, seek help. I think mothers know their babies best. You're with your baby all of the time, and you know what's normal and what's not normal. So if you don't feel like it's right, definitely seek help. Breastfeeding, yes, it's natural, but it doesn't come easy for everybody, so don't feel bad if you have challenges. I think most mothers, especially new mothers, have challenges, and even like you could do so much research and be so prepared, and then something completely unexpected pops up. So I think that that's just completely normal and is to be expected with breastfeeding. Breast milk is like liquid gold. Use it to, if you've got nipple damage, you can use it on your nipples instead of nipple cream. It's so effective. You can also use it in the baby's eyes for conjunctivitis, for rashes. It's like just amazing. Try and feed the baby on demand. I've always fed Avalia when showing signs of needing a feed rather than focusing on the clock, because it's not a good indication. Some babies feed really fast and their intake is really quick, so they'll be able to get heaps in 5 minutes, and other babies might take 20 minutes. So don't focus on the clock, just focus on your baby's signals. Try and work on supply and demand. If you want to increase your breast milk, or you want a bigger supply, then you feed more. Once you feed, the baby is stimulating your brain to say, hey, I've got this little baby, it wants more food, I need to make more. So basically what you take away, your body will replace. So it's kind of a myth that your baby can feed and take away all the milk. Your body is constantly making more milk, so you're never out of milk. But sometimes they will feed, not necessarily because they're hungry at that point, but because they're trying to establish a bigger supply for the future. You just fed your baby and you've put them down and you think, okay, you're gonna have a sleep now, and then they're up and then they just want to feed again. They want to constantly feed. They might feed 3 times in an hour and then have 3 hours break and then want to feed 3 times again. Cluster feeding, it's very overwhelming, and you can literally feel like a cow. I found it one of the most challenging parts of breastfeeding, but don't stress. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not producing enough milk the majority of the time, and it does pass. So just the worst part, I think, is like the first 6 weeks, and then the cluster feeding is like usually when they're having a growth spurt. On that note, the first 6 weeks, just transitioning from not being a parent to being a parent, and all of a sudden you've just got this extra person to think of, and it can be really overwhelming, it can be really stressful, and as rewarding and loving it is to have this new baby, it's also a huge transition to make. So don't be hard on yourself. I'm sure you have good days, you have bad days. It might not feel like it at the time, but it will get easier, and just know that it's absolutely normal. I remember feeling like the baby was literally on me 24/7, like she was just on me all day. But I think these times it's really important to have good support. Find somebody that can bring you food and do the washing for you, and just these little luxuries. I know not everybody has that support, but if you do, make sure you ask for help. A lot of us don't want to ask for help, but it does make all the difference, and you can be there 100% with your baby. Sit down, watch a movie, relax, do whatever you want to do that makes you happy, read a book. If breastfeeding is causing you pain, don't persevere through the pain. Make sure you release the suction. So just use your little finger in the corner of the baby's mouth, release the suction, and then put them on again. I find that if you persevere, once you've already got the damage, it's really hard then for the next feed because it's going to hurt already straight away. Make sure that your latch and attachment is good and your positioning every time. And it's really hard because I know you get the baby on and you're like, yes, it's on, and then you don't want to take them off in case they don't get on again. But for long-term breastfeeding, you really need to detach them and re-put them on, because it's just not worth getting blisters and cracked nipples and then having to heal that before you can start trying to get your positioning and attachment right again. So make sure you release them and don't put up with the pain. Skin to skin within the first hour of life is so important for your breastfeeding relationship. So if it's something that you want, it's definitely evidence-based to improve your breastfeeding relationship. So if it's something that you want, make sure you bring it up with your doctor or your midwife before you give birth, so that everyone knows that once you've had the baby, as long as there's no complications, they'll put baby straight on and you can have that 1 hour of undisturbed skin to skin. That was like my favorite part of, you know, just giving birth, having the baby just with me before they do any immunizations or anything. Some hospitals still bath within the first 24 hours. We didn't bath Avalia for 5 days. Avalia had vernix on her because she was prem, and the vernix is like just a thin layer of like white, like cottage cheese substance, and it's really moisturizing on the skin, so it stops their skin from drying out. It also helps them associate them with you, and they have that unique scent between you and your baby. When you're learning to breastfeed, try a few different positions. Most women breastfeed in the cradle hold this way, but there's also the football hold where the baby's head is on your breast and then the body goes around your body, and you kind of hold them like this. I really like that position because I found I did get some damage, and then when I changed the position, the mouth then was putting pressure on a different part of my nipple or my areola, so I wasn't getting pain in the same spot. My favorite will always be lying down in bed, because you can literally lie there and half fall asleep while the baby lies next to you and you're not actually using your body to hold them. The other thing is, I think, make sure you're really comfortable in the chair or in the bed or wherever you're feeding the baby, and bring the baby to where you're comfortable rather than leaning down and coming to the baby, because that's how you get sore backs. So make sure you're in a really comfortable position, you've got a good pillow and good support, you've got your water and everything, your phone, whatever you need nearby, a good book, and get comfortable before you start the feed. So another question that I had sent through was, how can I prepare for breastfeeding? So I think the most important thing is empowering yourself with knowledge. Knowledge is power. If you know what to expect, you know the evidence behind different decisions, then I think you'll make the right choice for you based on your circumstances. And the best way to get that knowledge is evidence-based. So you want to find reliable sources online, government websites, breastfeeding associations, your midwife, and making sure you've got a care provider that you trust. So when they give you information, you're going to trust what they say. And, antenatal education classes, watching breastfeeding videos. How can I tell if my baby's getting enough milk? It's actually a really hard part of breastfeeding, is that you can't actually see how much the baby is getting. When you're feeding formula, you can measure the mils. But when you're breastfeeding, you just have to trust your body and follow the signs of the baby. So if your baby is a good color, not pale, and a good muscle tone, you're getting plenty of wet nappies, so between 5 and 6 over a 24-hour period minimum. The baby seems settled in between feeds, like as long as you're not cluster feeding, in between the baby should seem settled and content. Gaining weight, the baby could lose up to 10% of weight is normal, but then your baby should be putting on weight after that time, and then growing in length, and then just their general well-being. I think as a mother, the same thing I was saying before, trust your instincts. I think that you know if something's not quite right. The urine should be fairly colorless and pale. If it's darker, that can be a sign of dehydration. And also you should be getting, in the beginning, at least a couple of runny poos, and that the color is changing as well, from that dark meconium poo when the baby's first born, and then it starts to go like a mustardy color. So you want to see that transition. So I reached out to you guys on Snapchat telling you that Avalia was biting me. Everyone wants to know how I overcome the biting. Avalia started biting me at 8 months. She had about between 4 and 6 teeth. And I put it down to attention seeking, if she gets a little bit bored, or teething. So different ways I overcame it depending what I thought it was. But initially she bit me and I just couldn't help it. Like, I screamed. It was so painful. And she laughed, and every single time she would bite me and I would scream, she would laugh and then want to do it again because she wanted to see the reaction. So it was so hard, but I put that down to attention seeking and a bit of boredom. Initially, I made a big reaction and then that wasn't working. So then I just removed her, I put her down, turned her the opposite way, and I said, ouch, that hurts, mummy. The feed is over now. And she hated that, absolutely hated it, and wanted to come back. So that ended up working. But the other thing was teething. When she was teething, sometimes she would feed and then kind of stop. Obviously her teeth were hurting, and start like rubbing on my nipple with her teeth. But the way I overcame that was using teething toys, using teething gel, and freezing fruit and things that would help soothe her gums. And if I thought she was just breastfeeding for comfort, I would try and offer some other remedy rather than just using me as a teething toy. And that we seem to get past that, and she doesn't bite me anymore. But I was asleep. We were breastfeeding one morning at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and she was attached, and we both fell asleep kind of lying next to each other, and she's obviously like slipped off my nipple mid-feed and gone to go back on, and just gone and literally went through my nipple. Like, I woke up screaming and blood was like coming out of my nipple, and Garth was just like, oh my god, what's happening? That was probably the worst time, and it did heal. I had to have like 2 days off breastfeeding, and it's amazing, like this, the breast milk around, it healed really quickly, and she's never done that again. So fingers crossed that that's the last of the biting. You guys would like to know, the next question is, what's it like feeding a baby over 1 year old? Well, they're very busy, so it's pretty much like baby doing downward dog and aerobics while you're trying to breastfeed. So it's definitely not as relaxing and calm as the little baby, but I think it's almost even more rewarding because it's the way that they look at you and the loving eyes and that gaze, and they play with your hair and they'll play with your necklace, and they might come off and giggle a few times, and it's really sweet, really, really enjoyable. And most mothers that I speak to that are feeding a baby over 1 year old just say it's a lot less stressful. But it's funny, like you'll see babies and they like twist into all these crazy positions and it doesn't hurt at all. So even when she's backwards and she might start doing something else, she'll tickle the dog or start playing a game and still breastfeed at the same time, get up, go play. They're very active at 1 year old. And it's a lot less demanding, like they don't cluster feed anymore. It's quick, like 5-10 minute feeds, maybe like 3 times a day. How did you maintain your milk supply when you went to Mexico last year? So I went to Mexico last year. I didn't take Avalia, it was just Garth and I. We needed some couple time, and I'd never been to Mexico, so I wasn't sure whether it was safe to take her. Before I left, about 6 weeks prior, I expressed almost every single day to build up enough supply to freeze so that while I was gone, Avalia had a milk bank there ready to go. I'm really lucky that she'll take breast or bottle, so I can leave her and she'll have my express breast milk. And then while I was away, I expressed and then just dumped the milk. I had to keep expressing, otherwise I got really engorged. I actually forgot part of my breast pump, and when we landed, it ended up being almost like 42 hours I had gone without breastfeeding, and I almost got mastitis. I was so engorged, and I was in the airport, I had to hand express to get the milk out because it was so painful. So if you're going to be doing a big trip, make sure you take all the parts of your breast pump, and make sure you have an adapter. If it's an electric one, you can use it in any country. Because I had kept expressing, I had maintained my supply, Avalia had milk, so when I came back, luckily I was a little bit concerned that she'd just get used to the bottle and not want to come back to the breast, but she did easily, so yay! Did you have any hard days, and what were some breastfeeding challenges for you? Yes, I definitely had hard days, and I had so many challenges. Honestly, some days I just felt so exhausted. I didn't know how I could possibly get up and breastfeed one more time. I felt like a cow. There were days I felt smothered, claustrophobic. I just wanted my own space. In the beginning, I was using a nipple shield for a little while because I had damaged my nipple, and I had one nipple that was a little bit flatter than the other one. So when she tried to attach, it was harder to attach, and I found it easier with a nipple shield. And I had got so used to using it just on one side that I woke up one night, it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, she wanted to have a feed, and I couldn't find my shield. She was crying, I was crying, I literally turned on all the lights, I was like crawling around on my hands and knees trying to find it, and I remember thinking, I can't feed without it. I did end up feeding, it was so painful, and I couldn't get her to latch properly, so I just stopped feeding, and I didn't end up feeding on that side for 24 hours. I got mastitis, which is a blocked milk duct, and it can happen if you go for a prolonged period without feeding and you don't empty the breast properly. And the worst thing to do if you have mastitis is to stop feeding. And I took a while to get a new nipple shield, so I just stopped feeding. It was just getting worse and worse. So that was a big challenge to overcome. And it's funny because the second time I lost my shield, I just was like, nope, I'm just feeding, and I ended up not using the shield anymore. I just realized I actually don't need it anymore. So from 4 months, I stopped using the nipple shield. The other thing was getting engorged and leaking. So I would only have to think of Avalia for a millisecond, and it was just like a tap coming out. So the supermarket, going shopping with my girlfriends, I had to make sure I had breast pads in all the time because I'd just leak everywhere. I remember going to lunch with a friend, and I didn't realize that I was leaking, and looking down, and I literally had like 2 dinner plate size wet patches over my boobs, and I was so embarrassed. I was like, maybe I should just tip water on myself, pretend like I tipped a jug of water, and then I was like, you know what? Stuff it. Who cares? Whatever. Yes, I'm breastfeeding. Yes, I've got milk all over myself, and I just moved on. Society's put so much self-doubt on women. Everyone questions their ability to nurture their own babies. You hear it so often, I hope I'm able to breastfeed, and I hope these things don't happen to me, or if I can breastfeed, I will. Good news is that most issues and most challenges can be overcome. So it's just finding the right support, finding the right breastfeeding associations or whatever it is, finding somebody to talk to, that you can overcome it, and we can do it, and these issues will get easier as the baby gets older. I think if there's anything that you can take away from this chat, it's that don't give up on a bad day. Like, just get through that day, get through that little challenge, and then if it's a good day and you think, everything should be going right, and you're still thinking, I hate this, this is not enjoyable, you're not looking forward to each day because you're dreading breastfeeding, then it's probably not right for you, and that's totally fine. It's not going to be right for everybody. And I think if it's just taking away from the experience of your baby, and you're not enjoying having your baby because breastfeeding is stressing you so much, then there are so many other options. At around 10 months, Avalia stopped breastfeeding on one side. Initially, when I first started breastfeeding, my left side had a really fast flow, and the right was a little bit slower. So she actually preferred the right side because it was a slower let down, and it wasn't so overwhelming for her because she was born 3 weeks early. She was a little baby and I think she found it really overwhelming, so she always preferred the right side. But it's funny because as she grew older, she started to prefer the faster side because she got more out and didn't have to work as hard. And at around 10 months old, she literally just stopped wanting to feed on one side. And I did persevere for a while. I kept offering it, and eventually I just started feeding off one side. So I've been feeding off only one side since 10 months, so for the last 7 months, and I now have one breast that's a whole cup size bigger than the other one because I have one with milk and one without milk. The other thing is, that's a big thing I get asked a lot, is how I wear like stick-on bras without wearing breast pads. My breasts haven't leaked since Avalia was about 5 months, so I haven't had to wear breast pads. That's a really good thing. It just makes getting dressed so much easier when you don't have to worry about leaking everywhere. Like I remember some nights I would literally wake up in like a pool of my own breast milk. Like wake up, maybe I was dreaming about something and the oxytocin was flowing and my milk just starts leaking, but I leaked heaps in the first 5 months and then nothing. Did your diet change for breastfeeding, and did you drink alcohol whilst breastfeeding? My diet didn't change, although I do eat more calories because I'm burning more off, and I try to drink more water because so much fluid's coming out of me. I do drink alcohol, not very often. If I'm going to an event, I usually plan ahead, and we'll have some expressed milk that I could give Avalia in a bottle. Do I wear specific breastfeeding friendly clothes? This is a really hard one because I find clothes that are flattering, comfortable, and easy to breastfeed. So obviously things that are high neck are hard because it's hard to pull down and breastfeed. But I was lucky because I was breastfeeding towards the end of winter, start of summer, and most summery dresses are really easy to pull down. I didn't really wear many pregnancy or breastfeeding specific clothes. I just adapted my own clothes to breastfeeding. Basically anything that's stretchy and pulls to the side is easy. Be careful of materials with leakage because some materials will show up the leakage easier than others, and a bra that's no underwire so it's more comfortable, and preferably one that clips down. Like this top would be really easy to breastfeed in because I just literally just pull it down. You can use a wrap if you like. I never used a wrap because Avalia absolutely hates having anything over her head, so I just didn't, which brings me to breastfeeding in public. I do breastfeed in public. I'm not afraid to breastfeed in public, and occasionally I also breastfeed in the car, changing rooms, literally anywhere. I've breastfed in the supermarket, I breastfeed in Kmart, I breastfeed at a wedding, I've breastfed anywhere. I've gone a little bit off track there. I hope I'm answering your questions okay. It's really hard with this subject because it's such a huge subject that it's easy to get a little bit off track, but I'll get back to the questions. Have I had any breast changes since pregnancy or breastfeeding? Yes, I definitely have. I get this question all the time, like how do you keep your breasts looking exactly the same as they were before? They're not. For one, just in pregnancy, my breasts grew like 2 sizes. Everyone noticed the change, but nobody knew that I was pregnant. That was the first sign of me being pregnant. It was like these massive boobs, 2 sizes bigger. And then when I initially had Avalia, they were really engorged, so they were also really big. And now that I'm not breastfeeding as much, they've definitely gone down. As I said before, I only feed off one side, so I have one breast that's slightly bigger than the other one, but when I stop feeding, that should all go back to normal. And the other thing is, like, my skin elasticity has changed since being pregnant and breastfeeding, so they probably don't sit as high. But other than that, no huge changes. How long will I breastfeed for? This one everybody wants to know, and it was like literally as soon as she turned 1 year old, everyone was like, oh, okay, how long are you gonna breastfeed for? Like, she's walking or she's this. Well, at the moment, it's working well for us. Like, Avalia enjoys it. I enjoy it. It's still beneficial. Like, it's not like they get to 1 year old and then all of the benefits just drop away. The World Health Organization recommend breastfeeding until 2 years. I kind of had 1 year in my mind as the initial goal. Like, I just wanted to make it to 1 year. But now I just think we'll just see how we go. And as long as it's what I think is right for her and I, we will keep breastfeeding. And I hope that this creates awareness. There seems to be a lot of people that think that it's wrong or abnormal to breastfeed past 1 year, when in fact the evidence is there. It's very beneficial. It reduces the risk of the mother getting breast and ovarian cancer, not only just for the benefits for the baby, but they're less likely to become obese, have asthma. They get the immunity from you, they get vitamins, proteins, minerals, calcium. Yeah, not just that, it's the emotional connection that we share, and we're still enjoying it, so we're just gonna keep going. And the last question is, will I get my breast redone after my babies? I think I want a few kids, more than 2 or 3. Probably yes, I will get them redone, but I will definitely make sure that I've had all of my babies before I get them redone. I know that I'm viewed as a role model to young girls, so I don't want everyone to think that I'm like, everyone go and get their boobs done, or like you need to have your boobs done to be happy or feel good about yourself. I'm not saying that at all, but for me, it increased my confidence, and I'm so happy with my decision. I haven't regretted it at all. So I think if it's something that's gonna make you happy, then go for it. But yeah, I definitely don't think that you need to get breast surgery to make yourself happy. It's gonna help with your confidence and it's gonna make you feel better about yourself, then go for it. So I just wanted to finish by saying that I know I've given Avalia the greatest start possible by breastfeeding her, and evidence suggests that that's the case. However, although I'm a breastfeeding advocate, I truly believe of doing what is right for you and your family. And if that's not breastfeeding, then you know, whether it's bottle feeding from after expressing, whether it's mixed feeding, it's formula feeding, whatever is the right decision for you is the right choice. And I think that there's no pressure, no judgment from me at all. You know, you've got to do what's right for your family. I don't think the way that you feed your baby should determine whether you're a good mother or not, or the type of mother or the type of parent that you are. And as long as you're giving unconditional love, support and attention to your child, fed is best, and caring and love and support is best. So on that note, I will finish. I hope that I gave you all the answers that you wanted. If you want to see a part 2, then let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and thank you for watching today. I also just wanted to thank you guys so much from the bottom of my heart, that it is just so nice to see that I've got this community of men and women around me that are so supportive of me breastfeeding and breastfeeding in public and breastfeeding beyond 1 year. So thank you so much. I get so many messages and I'm sorry I can't reply to each and every one of you. I am just so grateful that it can make even the littlest of difference in your life, and I really appreciate the support. So thank you.